The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, my name's Francis Vigent, and I'm CEO here at KnowAtom. Over the next hour or so, we're to talk a bit about KnowAtom's district guidance for implementing science remotely, as well as in hybrid learning environments to deal with the COVID restrictions on in-classroom teaching for the 2020-2021 school year. Things that we're going to look at through this time together is how to approach grade level instruction in science, how to leave the emergency phase of remote learning behind us, and guidance for taking a KnowAtom lesson remote, whether that's entirely remote or in some hybrid 2 days on, 3 days off, or 3 days on, 3 days off type model, as well as next steps for starting your school year with everything you need to succeed. So the first thing I'd like to take a look at is how to approach grade level science instruction. One of the common questions that we face is, what should we do? Because somebody last year skipped some units. School ended early, perhaps. Now, many districts were able to sort of continue with remote learning. Materials were sent home, and although it was in reaction to sort of the shock of school closing all of a sudden, many of those folks were able to make great progress and basically finish the year as best you can under those circumstances. However, many people also basically had school closed, and maybe there wasn't permission or guidance or access, or there's a lot of different things happened in different districts in terms of the quality and clarity of communication and how do we actually go about remote learning in this situation. So for those folks who basically will be inheriting students this year, let's say as a 5th grade teacher, whose students in 4th grade maybe didn't even get as far as the last 3 units of the year. Maybe they stopped in Unit 6 or Unit 7 because things just shut down. What our first point of guidance here is that as a 5th grade teacher, as a whatever grade level you're teaching, it's important that you teach at grade level this year, that you use the scope and sequence for your grade level, starting at Unit 1, laying the groundwork for science and engineering for your grade level, and progress through those lessons and units the way you normally would, okay? I'm going to explain to you how and why that's important. So what I'm showing you here on the screen is 2 scaffold summaries, one from the K-5, one through the 6-8. For the sake of trying to speak to everybody, I'm going to pretend that I'm a 5th grade teacher and that I am inheriting some 4th grade students who did not get Unit 6, 7, 8, or 9 because school closed, let's say in March. Now, one of the ways that folks panic about this is they say, oh my goodness, there's a gap. And so they think that what they need to do is go back and turn 5th grade into 4th grade. The problem with that is manifold. One is, if you turn 5th grade into 4th grade, how is that any different than 4th grade missing part of 4th grade? Because 5th grade will be missing part of 5th grade, okay? So by doing something like that, you're going to fall into a trap of creating a systemic gap that your children are going to suffer and really try to dig out of for the next 5 or more years. And it's going to create a problem for your entire school district, because there's going to be a critical mass of these students that are not operating at grade level simply because teachers chose not to operate at grade level, okay? And it's an important administrative decision to make sure that we are teaching at grade level despite whatever happened last year. Now, if students didn't get access to Unit 6, 7, 8, and 9 in 4th grade, that's okay. In the particular case of KnowAtom is designed to deal with gaps. And there's sort of 2 ways of looking at that. So I'm going to just focus, because again, I'm going to pretend that I'm a 5th grade teacher. I'm just going to focus on this Unit 6 right now. Remember, I said that my students came to me from 4th grade having missed Unit 6, 7, 8, and 9. Well, guess what? Unit 6 has relevance to Units 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 in grade 5. Now, a very simplistic way of looking at this would be like, oh no, students have no background knowledge in order to do these units. That's oversimplified, because in fact, grade 5 units 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are contexts in which students encounter elements of the concepts from Unit 6. And so what we can do is we can actually use those units in grade 5 as a context for students to encounter those concepts from grade 4 and learn them just in time to use them. Okay, so we don't need to create entirely separate lessons. What we're dealing with here is not entirely separate skills. We're not talking about, requiring some sort of, how to tie a special knot. It's not that kind of a thing. What we're talking about here are things like how matter and energy move and how they interact. And so through those interactions, let's say in this Unit 4, we're going to see energy transferring. So that idea that energy, what is energy and how does it transfer, has a home and a context, and that becomes part of the discussion. And the same thing in terms of ecosystem interactions. The way that plants and animals in an ecosystem interact, as well as food chains and food webs with things like the sun and producers and consumers and so on, we're seeing energy transfers. So again, there's another home for this sort of idea of how what energy is and how it transfers and so on. And so that sort of theme continues all the way across. So another way to look at this is that developing a deep understanding is equally achieved whether it is a forward or a backward connection. Okay, so there are going to be multiple units in grade 5 that are going to provide a link and a context to be able to think about, to be able to understand, and to be able to develop depth of understanding in grade 5 of the concepts that were in skills that were part of grade 4. It's true of every grade level, it's true of every unit. Okay, so what's really important here is don't get stuck thinking that this is sort of a climbing steps sort of process. It's not. It's much more of a networking, of a webbing process. So forget about steps and sort of like a pyramid scheme. Instead, think of a web. And so grade 5, the units and lessons that are a part of that grade 5 scope and sequence are important to maintain their integrity, their scope and sequence, and teaching those at grade level, because that is a piece of the web that is going to connect, and we're going to be able to sort of spin off and grab concepts and connect those into that sort of clear and well-articulated scope and sequence, okay? And we are going to be able to maintain high-quality pedagogy through that process. One of the ways to go about integrating and preparing yourself to be able to engage students just in time in your at grade level units and lessons to make sure that concepts that were a part of last year don't go sort of neglected is to look at concept maps. Okay, so what you can do is as a 5th grade teacher, again, I'm just using that as an example. As a 5th grade teacher, you can look backwards to the 4th grade concept maps in the interactive, assuming that your school district or school is using KnowAtom in 4th grade. And if they aren't, it doesn't matter. The guidance doesn't change here. It's just that if your district is using KnowAtom at 4th grade, the documentation is incredibly clear, okay? And you're in an even better place. I'm going to explain more about that in a second. But those concept maps are going to show you big ideas, okay? So you're going to see things about, like maybe here, simple machines, levers, redirecting forces, how effort gets applied and so on. And so as we look across things like matter and sound or matter and electricity, uh, forces on Earth and how energy transfers through Earth and even celestial bodies and things like this, we are going to get to see opportunities to connect these concepts, okay? And so the way that they get connected is not with a separate lesson. We don't need to create mini lessons even around these things. What we need to do is we need to be thought partners in the process, and we need to ask questions. For example, how, you know, how could sound move the surface of a drum? If we're learning about the drum, we're looking at it, like, how is it that sound is moving the surface of that drum like that we're seeing in this picture or that we're seeing in our experiment? How is that possible? And that comes down to energy and the interaction between energy and matter. But then we might look at it and say, well, why is the sand or why is the salt bouncing there? And they're like, well, it's actually because energy is being transferred from the surface of the drum to the sand or the sugar, whatever's on there in our experiment, and that's actually lifting and carrying a load. It's actually redirecting a force, and it's bouncing what's there. And so that's not different than what would happen with a catapult or what would happen with a lever. But we have to look at it more closely and think about where is it that the effort's being applied and what's the load? How are there maybe some similarities and differences? So this becomes part of a discussion and a realization. Now, one way to look at this in a very simplistic way is that as you're looking down your unit order for this year, again, pretend you're a grade 5 teacher, you want to look down and you say, okay, I'm going to teach units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and knowing that in 2019 or last year, my students in 4th grade missed 6, 7, 8, and 9, I know that because I've looked at the concept maps that there are opportunities to discuss those concepts in context within the lessons and the units that are going to happen this year. In my normal, again, I'm going to pretend I'm a 5th grade teacher, in my normal 5th grade unit 6, 7, 8, 9 sequence. And so I'm going to discuss those. I'm going to make sure that I create seed questions. I create opportunities. I use thinking routines with the students and create prompts so that those concepts come up in discussion and become connected to the context and understood within the context of what we're doing this year. And that's the key. That's how you avoid the gap. Because otherwise, what happens is people revert back to, they turn 5th grade into 4th grade, and those children miss 5th grade. So what happens? They go on to 6th grade. Well, now they're missing 5th grade. So 6th grade becomes 5th grade. And now you potentially have students coming and going, and so it gets more and more complicated because the variables increase, where you have an opportunity to stop this right now, okay, and prevent that trauma from occurring, okay, because it is a trauma. We'll talk more about that in a second, which students would have to dig out of, and as a community, you'd be digging out of it for years. Now, the next piece is the resources I'm referring to here in terms of concept maps. Those are found within your unit. So you can look at the back of your teacher binder unit, okay, for your grade level. But if you want to find the prior grade level, you got to log into the interactive. And again, your district would have to be contracted for this, but you could just look backwards, okay? Look at the grade level prior, click on the units that the teacher told you that were missed. Take a look at those, and then you'll see the concept maps. Another place you can take a look is down in the supporting resources that are at the bottom here. This is where you're going to find scope and sequences. You're also going to find the scaffold summary and unit maps. Now, as a district that is implemented KnowAtom, you're in great shape to be able to carry on at grade level instruction. Please, please, please do not waste this year reverting backwards. it's going to be a destructive thing for all students, whether they're mainstream, whether they're special ed, whether they are English language learners or English learners, ELs. Take a look at the curriculum scaffold summary and unit map, which is also found down here. The curriculum, KnowAtom's curriculum, has always been designed to deal with systemic gaps, because most typically when we encounter a district, we find folks who have not been teaching integrated models, and those districts are in big trouble this, as a result of what's just happened. Because you can imagine districts that are teaching discipline-specific models that aren't using KnowAtom, they have no place for earth science this year. That was supposed to happen last year. And they have now a systemic gap across their entire district, okay? That's the same thing that was happening to individual children before, but now it's all children. So it becomes even more visible, right? The way that KnowAtom has always dealt with that has been to make sure that that we're following equip guidelines, and also, through the curriculum's design, that a standard is not once and done, that it actually occurs in multiple units and in multiple grade levels. And you can even see that in the screenshot down here. This particular standard occurs in grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5. And guess what? It occurs in unit 1 and unit 6. So guess what? If a student missed that unit 6 because school closed last year and they were in grade 4, it's not a big deal, because there's an opportunity for those students to encounter that standard again in a new context in grade 5. And in fact, if they've been with your district and your district's been using KnowAtom, they got some exposure to that standard in grade 3. So it's going to be okay. And those students can operate at grade level because these standards are three-dimensional. They are evolving across skills, content, and cross-cutting concepts simultaneously within a year and from year to year, and that's why KnowAtom is designed the way that it is. And it's something that I would say half the time goes underappreciated by the average folks that use the curriculum, because they don't necessarily recognize the impact that having a standard occur only in one grade level can have on learners and on a learning system as a whole in the quality of instruction. But here, as a result of the pandemic and the shock that we've encountered, what you're going to find is that you can not only see through the documentation, what concepts were occurring where, and what would have been missed, but you've been given context at grade level where those concepts can be part of the conversation, part of the realization, part of the discovery. And in fact, the foundation has already been laid for those students 2 years ago in many cases. And it will be built upon again in future years. So it's going to be okay, but it's important that you don't slow down, revert, pick and choose, create focus standards, and otherwise traumatize students by leaving grade level, high quality grade level instruction behind in pursuit of something that's lost. Okay, that's how you make, small progress, is to revert back and make small progress towards your grade level instruction by reverting to prior grade levels and abandoning the grade level. And there's not enough time. Another thing too is the expectation that people are going to teach all extra units. Forget it. Okay, number one, it's not necessary. Number two, it's not helpful. Number three, it's not practical or possible. You need to teach at grade level. Okay, your children are capable of this. And this is part of leaving the emergency phase behind. I want to talk about that. So another realization that a lot of teachers and schools discovered as part of school closures is that a traditional classroom model doesn't just fail in person-to-person classroom settings, but it fails even more dramatically in a remote setting, okay? Because a traditional classroom model where I have this question mark in the center, that's where teachers in a traditional classroom hand out explanations, tell students, how to, what to, ask them to stop and follow me, and so on and so forth. And the students learn that their job is to follow the leader, the teacher being the leader and the student being the follower. Okay, that traditional model doesn't work well in a normal face-to-face classroom, but it fails even more miserably in a remote learning model. Number one, it's not engaging. Number two, this is not how children learn. Number three, the teacher cannot, by virtue of their presence and sort of having students shut in a room, are not able to maintain their attention and their presence. And so what tends to happen in these models is you get single-digit percentages turning out, right? Students vote with their feet. They're not interested in being lectured, and they're not interested in sort of handing something back and playing sort of the role of puppet. And the tools are not set up for that, okay? Now, the problem also here is caregivers. Now, something that we saw in the emergency phase was that teachers started inundating parents or caregivers with lots of emails and worksheet packets and, oh my goodness, and here you go, work and stuff to do. Most parents set that stuff aside because they didn't see it was valuable. They looked at themselves and they're like, I can't lecture my kid for hours and hours a day. I don't want to. They're not going to listen to that. It's better for them to play with their friends, to go out and play, to, and even though there's social distancing that's supposed to be going on, that's what's happening. And kids may even be sitting on video games or, behind the TV and that sort of a thing. This model is not intellectually stimulating, but the other problem with it is that there's no skills that are being built here. And whether there's a teacher or a caregiver in the center, the skills aren't being built because the students are not in touch with the content. And so what became very visible very quickly in the emergency phase was that, like we've always said, once the teacher disappeared, there was sort of no warden to be able to enforce the process of traditional school. So in those traditional classrooms, it was no wonder that there was extremely low levels of engagement. Okay. Are there other challenges that are part of it? Connectivity to internet, access to devices, availability of caregivers and siblings or someone at home to work with students? Absolutely. Was this a pandemic shock? Something that nobody could have reasonably been prepared for? Absolutely. But the difference is that folks who were already part of a high-performing team, who were already investing in developing their students as independent thinkers, and that next generation instructional environment where students were truly, I'll just show you here, where students were truly developing skills to access and develop and use the content, and the teacher was playing the role of coach. These folks were the folks that were getting double-digit percentages of students showing up regularly, engaging, and so on. Right? The kids who could connect wanted to connect, and they were trying to connect, and that's the difference. Okay, because here students have a role, they have skills, they see the purpose, and they are participating in answering why and how for themselves. Okay, just kind of going back here, that high-performing team, the children understand their role, and they understand the goals and the role of themselves in making effective decisions and cooperating in this learning process and so on. So, being a high performing team is the foundation for success. And the team is not just a school building. It's, peer to peer. It's, principal to teacher. It's student to student. It's student to teacher. Okay. These are all connections. And so the point I want to drive home here is that as you approach the coming year, it's important that you commit to delivering a robust model of remote science instruction, but that you do so by approaching the groundwork as how we're going to function as a high-performing team. Okay, we value diversity of thinking. We value decision making. We value different ideas, and that we balance participation and we work cooperatively together, and that we participate in leadership. I mean, how many people throw their hands and say, "Well, I don't know, nobody told me." That's not participating in leadership. That's being a victim. That's playing the victim. Okay. If you don't know, ask. Okay, that's how we participate in leadership. If you don't think something, you can't see how something works, so you're questioning something. Ask, challenge. That's how it works, and that disposition is what we want of our students, right? We don't want students who don't understand something to sit back and wait for someone who's an adult to figure it out for them. Okay, that's dependency. Now, I've mentioned thinking several times. All of the tasks and activities, as I'm sort of get into the remote learning piece here, what's important is that we're taking what would have happened in the classroom and we are making sure that we are basically breaking those things into tasks. And when I say a task, I mean a objective, a prompt, a kind of activity or part of an activity. And we're sequencing those just the way that they are in the lessons. But the goal of any task is that students are using their thinking as a tool to deepen their understanding. If the task doesn't involve thinking as a tool to deepen understanding, throw it away. It doesn't matter. It's not worth anybody's time, yours or the students. You're going to have to be more creative if that's the case. Okay. Now, what do I mean when I say thinking as a tool for deepening understanding? Those tasks need to involve students authentically creating, evaluating, analyzing, applying, remembering in all kinds of different combinations. But here's the key, that it's in a context where they're authentically applying those in order to develop an understanding of that context, okay? Very, very, very important, okay? Filling out a worksheet, nope, okay? That does not develop a deep understanding of a context, okay? Remembering the definition to a word is not developing an understanding of a context, okay? It does not allow us to explain, infer, to argue, to support, or so on. There are aspects of remembering that are important. Certainly, knowing the definition to a word, is helpful at times, but it's not sufficient. Okay, and certainly an activity should not be dedicated to that. It's not worth the valuable time. Okay. I mentioned earlier about avoiding the trap of low quality, below grade level tasks and elements that can actually traumatize students. And I wanted to point out this list, which comes from TNTP's Reimagined Teaching. How is it that teachers can traumatize students? It's well documented. Poor instructional practices, forfeiting strong grade level aligned instruction, or denying the student access. What does that look like? Reverting back to the grade year prior. Right? It might come from a good place in your heart. Oh, the students didn't get this. I want to go back to that. Guess what? That's going to traumatize those students. It's a poor instructional practice also. Systems and structures that prevent high quality learning experiences. If your remote learning is worksheet packets and Zoom check-ins, half an hour where there's some demonstration that happens and then kids go away until tomorrow, that's low bar, low quality, a poor system and a poor structure, and a poor learning experience, and kids are going to check out. Older children are going to turn off their videos. If it's live, you're going to see black screens, and they're going to go do something else. You're going to be teaching to yourself. Okay, little kids just aren't going to log in. Parents aren't going to value it. Okay, and the kids themselves won't value it. They're just going to get lost in some other activity. Poor instructional coherence. This is another one of those things. People, I need to supplement. I need to do this. No, that creates poor instructional coherence. Stick to your grade level instruction. Okay, stick to the coherence that you have in the unit order, the lesson sequencing, and remember, in order to get at concepts which were from years prior that may have been missed, look at those concept maps and involve those in the discussion, which is part of the instructional coherence, the good, well-articulated instructional coherence that's part of your normal grade level. Okay, that's how you effectively leapfrog and accelerate here. Put your time in advance to articulate sort of some templates that you'll use, and I highly recommend Seesaw, SEESAW, and you can go to online, seesaw.me, is a tool that you can use to structure all of the segments of your lesson and involve parents in that platform so that you're not sending prompts and trying to correct prompts and lots of emails and lots of communications and so on and so forth, because you know what? Lots of communication is most often poor communication. Okay, lots of messaging is most often mixed messaging. And what clear messaging is concise messaging. And being able to use a system like Seesaw.me, and I don't know anybody there. I'm not plugging it for any reason other than I like the system. I think it's very intuitive. I think that it's free or extremely low cost. It integrates with Google Classroom, and it's very scalable in terms of you can create templates and use them, and we'll talk a bit about how that works in a second. But the bottom line is that is going to create streamlined, it's going to create transparency, streamlined communication, and clear messaging that students, teachers, and parents can all be on the same page. And it's going to reduce anxiety and increase the quality of work and learning, okay? So avoid that poor communication. Destructive attitudes, beliefs, and judgments. Bottom line here, if you're going to look at this year as, guess what? This is not a normal school year. It's a COVID thing. It's, the state's making us open in a 3-2 or a 2-3, or it has to be 100% remote or whatever. And therefore, it's just not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. All right. That's a destructive attitude. The bottom line is that we can get the same intellectual engagement out of a remote learning experience that we can out of an in-class learning experience, but it's going to take thought and planning on the part of adults. Okay? If we foster and develop that destructive attitude and belief system, it's going to transfer through the system down to kids and parents and so on and so forth, and it's going to create a problem that's traumatic for students. They're going to be digging out of that for years. Kind of related to that is this idea that we often have expectations of students that we don't model through our interactions. Okay, so it's important that through this process, and again, these are all things that apply in normal years as well as years that in-person instruction is muted or in some way changed the way that it is right now. That if we're going to expect a disposition, we better model it through our interactions. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And that comes down to, again, we talk about things like growth mindset, the power of why, and so on. If you believe you can't and it won't and so on and so forth, you're right. It can't and won't because of the disposition and the expectation that you have. So it's important that when you feel yourself going in that direction, that you stop and check that at the door. Mentioned really quickly here that next generation model of instruction a little earlier. So this is unchanged, whether it's in person or remote or hybrid. Okay, students are going to be developing skills, making cross-cutting concept connections, and developing those skills and making those connections in the context of the phenomena, in the context of the content. And teachers are going to be structuring their prompts for what tasks they want children to engage in what order, in order to engage the students' thinking and their SCPs and the cross-cutting concepts. Okay, so that's the point of the prompt. The teacher is still acting as the coach. They're going to be increasing the challenge, and the teacher's going to be providing feedback. It's just going to be a little different in terms of the medium that we use when it's remote versus in person, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, when we're remote, some of the things that we're thinking about here is using tools like Soccer Circle, which is part of the interactive, which you've always had access to. Third grade on up ought to be able to use Soccer Circle without an issue. Particularly, third grade, maybe about 2 months in or so, once we get a little bit more able to kind of type, and even if it's single finger kind of pecking type stuff. Zoom, Seesaw.me, Google Hangouts, these are all tools for remote instruction, but the thing is that tool in and of itself isn't the task. It isn't the context. It's a tool for students to be able to engage in a context or engage in a task. And again, that seesaw.me that I keep plugging, that is a great tool to actually structure the tasks themselves so that videos can be exchanged, things can be written on virtually, recordings, voice, video, and so on. Now, involving caregivers, really important. Remember, most caregivers, parents, will have only experienced themselves a traditional model of instruction where somebody explains and you listen, and that's what it means to be a good student. You sit and listen. It's going to be important that as a teacher, when you're dealing with students remotely, that you involve that caregiver as an instructional partner, as sort of your teacher's aide in the home, but you need to onboard them and help them understand the goals of instruction and what a next generation model of instruction is and what it means to be a thought partner as opposed to an explainer, right? Our goal is not for students to remember everything that it was explained to them, because that's impossible. Our goal is for students to develop the skills and an understanding of real life context so that they're making connections and skills that will serve them in answering any question or solving any problem for the rest of their life, regardless of the discipline, career, degree, whatever that they choose to pursue. And if we can help caregivers understand that, they're going to be able to reflectively listen to their students, to monitor that learning environment, to help communicate with you as the practitioner, as the administrator, the challenges and successes that their students having. And they're going to be a point of encouragement to making sure that you have high levels of engagement, not just because the environment that you're creating is engaging and has a role for the student that they understand and that they value, but also because they're going to help students when it comes to things like impulse control. We're not going to go outside right now. We're going to, spend this hour with science because that you have that live session coming up later. And that's going to be a big support to you in accomplishing your goals. Now, taking KnowAtom remote, it's important to realize that there are 5 general parts to every single lesson, and they go in this order. The first part is nonfiction reading, where we may use a picture thinking routine. And this is where we get our first interaction with some phenomena. The second piece is scientific discourse, or what we call Socratic dialogue, where we use our realizations and our wonders to encounter the diversity of realizations and wonders in our class, and to think about not only our own ideas, but the ideas of others, and to try to seek out evidence in what we already know to try to answer or inform ourselves about what we may think about problems and questions that we have, and what we think may be the answer to those problems and questions. The third piece is students actually acting to individually or cooperatively plan how they're going to get an answer to the problem or question that's burning in their mind, that they don't have any evidence to support what they think is the answer. And then, of course, the fourth part is where students get materials in order to carry out their plans, to get the data, to figure out if what they think is the answer to a question or the solution to a problem is actually that. And finally, the results of those experiments, analyzing and evaluating them, and sharing out the conclusions that we come to as individuals with the broader group, so that we can look at the diversity of conclusions and consider those conclusions and the evidence that's being given to reflect back on our own understanding of how and why a particular problem or question is solved or may not be solved in the way that we thought. And then that provides opportunities to not only think as a group, but also to connect with the upcoming lesson, whether that's in the same unit or another unit. So taking a second here just to sort of think about those 5 segments. Now, this would normally happen face-to-face in a class environment, but again, the way that the curriculum is designed, it's going to scaffold up over the course of those units, and the goal of each of those segments is not to complete a task, but it's instead to engage in thinking moves within each of those segments, which are made up of tasks, right? So the purpose of the task is to engage students in different combinations of thinking moves in order to improve the sharpness of their thinking, really, to develop thinking as a skill. Okay, and what I mean by thinking as a skill, the skill of observing closely and describing what's there, building explanations and interpretations, reasoning with evidence, making connections, considering different viewpoints and perspectives, wondering and asking questions, capturing the heart, forming conclusions, uncovering the complexity of a situation and going below the surface of things. Those 8 should be part of every task that's a part of whatever you create for students to do this year. Okay, when you are parsing your KnowAtom lessons down into prompts in Seesaw or in some other platform, what you're doing is that what you should be doing is that you are creating opportunities for students to engage in these thinking moves in different combinations. Okay, if a thinking move is existing on its own, singular, it's probably a rote task. Okay, thinking moves don't typically exist by themselves. Okay, thinking moves they have an animal-like behavior. They travel in packs. Okay, they're not alone. So, you might see 3 or 4 thinking moves in one task, and 3 or 4 different ones in another task, or you might find overlap. There might be 6. There might be 3. There might be 8. Okay, but you shouldn't be going through an entire lesson for sure. And by lesson, what I mean is the group of experiences that takes you across all those 5 things. Okay, certainly without engaging every one of these thinking moves as a student, not as a teacher, but as a student. Now, how do we do this remotely or in a hybrid setting? we made this nice chart to try to help you out here. It's just like I said earlier, these things are all much simpler than what you may think. One, because of the documentation that we've provided you, the way that the curriculum is structured is number two. And number three, because these are the same things that you would have been doing in class. And if you haven't been doing them, it's sort of, the cows have come home. So here it is, time to actually engage. So here's how it works, okay? So take a look at reading, for example. Now, all of the reading material for KnowAtom, whether it's a trade book or one of our own readers, has been professionally read with a document camera, and the video is available in the interactive this year, okay? So really important, when you see something that says, read to me, KnowAtom Interactive, that's a video that you can make available to your students where the reading will be read aloud to the kids. But here's the thing. That's a nice extra activity. Engage students in a picture thinking routine as part of reading. And that can be done by structuring that picture thinking routine within Seesaw and giving students the graphic organizer that's available right at the bottom in the supporting resources. It's been there for a while now, over a year. That picture thinking routine is something that you can drop into Seesaw, and students can use it as they're reading. Now, every student should have a reader. Every student should have access to materials this year. It's one of the important changes that's going to need to occur. Okay, all of this can be done remotely, and students can record highlights from their picture thinking routine. They can record that either in text or with video, and they can upload that to something like Seesaw, and you'll get it back, and then you can respond live or in a recording. Okay, so this can be done entirely remotely. Discussion. Now, when we're dealing with kindergarten, second grade discussion, another one, picture thinking routine is huge, but you know what? For students at kindergarten to second grade, to use something like, a cell phone camera or something like this, they don't have cell phones a lot of times, most times. So that's fine. You have to think of that caregiver again. The caregiver is going to be able to help document and act as a reflective listening thought partner and actually document, whether it's in text or with video and a cell phone camera, something like that, and upload that to Seesaw. So keep that in mind, okay? Students can respond with their caregiver even to other students' wonders or other students' picture thinking elements as part of the discussion, and they can do that by video recording and upload that, okay? And as a teacher, you can coordinate discussion live or with recorded prompts where you're taking elements of what students have shared. Not every student, but you could pick several diverse sort of ideas and use those as highlights with a prompt for reflection. Okay, so again, engaging students always in those thinking moves. Okay, because we want creating, evaluating, analyzing, remembering, applying to be tools which students are developing in order to develop their own understanding of a context. Okay, that's the goal here. So the context is whatever particular phenomena, what's going on in that unit from a science perspective, but this is a way that discussion can become remote because discussion is a two-way exchange of ideas and also can involve the observation of third parties, right? So if I'm discussing with you in a teacher's room where it's filled with teachers who are also sort of part of the discussion, you and I are exchanging our ideas, but everybody else is also thinking about what we're talking about. They may be taking sides. They may be thinking of other evidence. They may have a third opinion or a fourth opinion. And so you can create a forum for that online where it's, everybody can be part of that discussion, and that thinking is honored and those contributions are honored. In grades 3 through 8, okay, you can do all of the above. Okay, the role of the caregiver may be different. Okay, it probably is, especially as you start getting towards 8th grade. But another piece here is that you can have live discussion via Soccer Circle, which is the tool we provide you in the interactive. It can happen. You can leave Soccer Circle discussion open for hours or days. Okay, students can log in and discuss what's going on and contribute when they have access to the internet, when they have access to a computer that day. Because remember, most families have more than one child. So if there's one computer, or there's a slow internet connection, or there's no internet connection, things are going to be happening, shared resources at home. And, it might be mom or dad is going to work and uploading things, or maybe they're going to, the store at the end of the day, and the store has internet connection. And so there's a way for the kids to connect and upload what they need to do. So, it can be live, but not necessarily simultaneous discussion via Soccer Circle. If you're in a community where most kids or all kids have access to the internet and devices, then great. Have live discussion via Zoom. Okay. You can have side rooms that are part of Zoom as well, so that if you have large classes or multiple sections that are part of the same discussion, you can break them into sub-discussions. That's not a problem. So in the case of hybrid environment, I would say that reading and discussion, I would leave as remote activities, okay? So what we just discussed, whether you're going to go 100% remote or some kind of a 2 days on, 3 days off type hybrid model, I would leave those as remote, okay? Those are things that are easy to structure, easy to execute, easy to engage in, and they can happen asynchronously, not at the same time. So that's great. Lab planning, this can also be done. All of these things can be done remote. So lab planning can, at kindergarten, 2nd grade, every student has a reader inside there. Those are templates for lab planning. So a child and a caregiver can work together on that. Okay, and so the caregiver can act as a thought partner. And, I think something that's worth pointing out here is that a lot of caregivers are extremely interested in ways that they can engage more productively and more authentically with their child in order to help their child learn and respond and engage with the world around them in a productive manner. So providing your caregivers with the same resources that you have access to, like how to create a seed question, sentence starters for Socratic dialogue. What is a Socratic dialogue? All these sort of resources that are available to you, you should consider looking them over and with a purposeful prompt, providing those to caregivers, because you're going to be enriching the interaction between that caregiver and their child, their student, okay? And in some cases, it'll even be siblings. So keep that in mind. That's going to be a productive, very rich and productive opportunity here. So at the K2 level, lab planning can occur with a caregiver, right? Every child has a reader. Send those readers home, okay? That easy. And then engage students in live or recorded video assessment, those formative assessments, right? So you as the teacher create within Seesaw prompts that the students and their caregivers are going to be responding to, okay? So this is something that could happen in a socially distanced class with children acting as thought partners, distanced from each other appropriately. But this is, again, something that at the K2 level, I would probably leave as remote. up to you. It depends on if you're in school 2 days out of 5, so 2 days on, 2 days in class, 3 days out of class, or whether you're in class 3 days and out of class 3 days. It does sort of have a little bit of an impact in terms of what's most valuable to do in the classroom. Once you get to 3rd grade on up, it's important that children start planning with a virtual partner or some kind of a partner. So depending on how the social distancing works out in your classroom, this may be something you want to do in class if you have a hybrid model, or you know what, just have kids be virtual partners. And again, adhering to the rules that we've always had. Everybody's responsible for their own lab plan. The virtual partner or the partner, whether they're streaming over video or there's some recordings that are going back and forth or whatever, is acting as a thought partner. Okay, and we're trying to come to some agreement and consensus through that lab planning process. Okay, and that's where we are, thinking about the problem. We're thinking about what we know about it, what we think is the answer to it. We're looking at the materials that are available. The materials, think about how easy this is. We can just, as a teacher, we can lay the materials out and take a picture and post it. And we can just put a number next to each item, say what it is. It's that easy. And so the kids can work within that structure. And in the process, you can structure your prompts the way that you would structure your check-ins in class for these grade 3 to 8 students. And what you do is that you, within Seesaw, you create that prompt. So maybe a student works on question, research, hypothesis, and they owe you back a video recording that explains why, how, and what about each of those. Why I chose this, how it's going to work, and what I'm hoping to learn from it, or what I think may happen here, that type of a thing. And so you can respond back with questions by video, okay? So that's how we can keep the dialogue going. And the initial maybe intuitive way to think is like, oh, well, I get a video one day and I respond the next day, and so this takes forever. Well, it depends on how you structure your expectations. If your expectation is, because you understand the nature of your students to be having access to the devices and internet and so on, that you can require students to, do this in the morning and respond by noon, so that you can respond by 1 o'clock and, they'll have something to you by 4 o'clock, or, however it works. That's your prerogative, and that's how you're going to create momentum. You have to set expectations, or everything's going to take forever. Okay, it's no different than a classroom. If you're in a hybrid model, this is something that could happen the normal way. There could be a lab partner that's 6 feet away, and you could come over to those lab partners 6 feet away, and you could have a normal check-in, normal formative assessment. Okay. I think for me, that's very important. If I'm a grade 3 through 8 teacher and I have 2 days on with students in my classroom, I'm going to use it. And that's where I'm going to use it. Okay. For lab planning in grade 3 through 8. I'm also going to probably use it for experimenting, which is the next piece here. Okay. So what I've circled is what I personally, if I'm a grade 3 through 8 teacher, would use my time on. If I'm K through 2, I would probably use my time on, I would probably use my time on discussion and lab planning, or with lab planning and experimentation. Okay, it really depends. It depends on, if you're a K2 teacher, how involved your caregivers are willing and able to be. Because again, K1, 2, there's going to be more need for a caregiver to record and post versus a child recording and posting on their own, just by virtue of fine motor skills, technology, appropriateness, these sort of things. Now, hands-on experimentation in K through 8. What I would say is, if you have a hybrid model, students should have their own materials. You know, it's difficult if students don't have their own materials to maintain sort of the social distance requirements and still have engagement between two students. Certainly, if you have more than two students sharing materials, it's a total non-starter, okay? One way around that is that you could have students wear gloves, and they could, you know, take turns doing different things, but again, not more than two students. And again, that's only if you have a hybrid model. If you have a remote model, or what I think is also you know, quite productive, is to send those materials home to parents, okay? This is a great way to connect the school with home, okay? This is a great way to extend what's happening in school virtually with something physical that's happening at home in reality. So you send those materials home to parents in like a 1 gallon bag type thing. And obviously tell them what they are. Don't send home unmarked bags of powder and so on. You know, people need to know what things are. There are MSTS sheets in your binders and in online as well. Make sure that those are going home. Anytime materials go home, tools, materials, it's always with adult supervision, right? These are not toys. None of this is a toy process, okay? So it's important that there's proper supervision if children are going to be prototyping or experimenting with materials at home. That's why we give the materials to the parents, to the caregivers, and it's their job to supervise and make sure that those things are being used appropriately. Now, when I talk about hands-on experimentation, it's the experimenting, the data collection, the analysis, and forming a conclusion, okay? If I can do that in class, I would probably choose to do that in class. But if I don't have that option because I'm 100% remote, you know, I can send it home, and the students can post video recordings of their analysis, of their data, of their thoughts as the experiment is going on, of their conclusion. And as a result of that, what we can have is a formative assessment. So as a teacher, I can post video prompts or thinking routines that I want students to engage in related to the video that they've given me. And then I will get something back. And then that will allow me to ask further questions by video or by text and engage that student in further formative assessment, okay? You can also create prompts like, you know, if you want each student to talk about their conclusion and specifically to focus on how their thinking has changed. So the before, what I thought, and the after, what I thought. How has my thinking changed? It's sort of compare and contrast, okay? And post that in their Seesaw to the account, okay? All very doable remotely. And again, something I would do remote even if I had a hybrid environment going on. Finally, conclusions. So debriefs and transitions. So for kindergarten through grade 8, we can create virtual think pair shares or with a sibling or a caregiver at home, and we can have students report out. And then what we can do is, as teachers, we can take that and we can pick highlights, and we can use those recorded highlights as an opportunity to create a prompt where we ask students to really reflect on you know, observations in the differences of approach and the differences of outcomes, and how that changes their thinking about their own conclusion. What you know, how could we, or you know, how would we change our question, or how would we change the problem now that we know sort of the conclusions that other teams or other folks came to in our class? Okay, again, something that is done really well remotely. Okay, all of these things are the same things that would go on in the classroom. If you end up with 100% in person, wonderful. Okay, if you're 100% remote, these things can happen 100% remote. If you are in a hybrid model, do things remote that lend themselves to being remote, and do things in person where you can add more value because of your skill and training as a teacher, interacting with students than a caregiver may be able to give, given their limited training. Okay, that's what it comes down to. Now, people might ask also, when we're talking about 2 days or 3 days on, how much time? I would give at the K2 level, when it comes to lab planning and experimenting, I would give a solid hour to an hour and a half. And I would give the same thing when it comes to grades 3 through 8. I would do more of an hour and a half to 2 hours, okay, in total each rotation, to what I've circled here in class. The rest of it can happen remotely, and I would aim to have research, reading, discussion, lab planning, all of this going on each week. So if you're doing 5-day weeks where you see kids for 2 days and they're off for 3, I would be trying to rinse and repeat this process each week. Okay. And what that's going to do is that means that you're going to be going to a new lesson basically each week. Okay. If you're in 3 days on, 3 days off, so you have more of a waterfall schedule happening, then I would try to get through this sequence each time you pass through that 6-day cycle. Okay. So that's a good way to look at it. Important COVID modifications for hands-on learning. Every student should have their own reader and materials. It's not practical to be wiping these things down with hand wipes and spraying them with sanitizer and all of that, okay? That's true of many things in a child's world. The other thing is that you should be prepared to go 100% remote at any time, because as we go into the winter, there's a high probability that that'll happen, certainly in some states, if not in all states. So setting yourself up now to have every student with a reader and their own set of materials and even tools is important. Now, do you need to have tools for every child? Probably not, because most of the tools that we use are things that are commonly found in a household environment. If a child's working with adult supervision, those things will be there. There may be some specialized tools that the district may want to reach out about, but as a bare minimum, you should have enough consumable materials for every child. So if you have a classroom of 30 and you've been buying a kit for 30, those kits are designed for students to work in pairs. So you need a second set of consumables for each of those units so that each child can act independently. And we can modify that for, the reader aspect if that's necessary, but keep that in mind, okay? It's really important. If you try to, at the last minute get something because you need it tomorrow or next week, it's not going to happen. Now is the time. Okay, we need purchase orders, we need to know counts, we need all of that so that we can get you what you need in time to lay the groundwork and be successful for the school year. Remember, pairs may be replaced by independent experimentation. That's the best way to do this, whether it's in classroom or at home. Okay? It's very difficult to be 6 feet away and trading and doing. It's going to add frustration and time to things. But it's doable, but if you don't have kids in class, it's going to be a disaster. And it's going to be hard, even if you do. Teams of 3 or 4 should be discontinued. Teams of 3 and 4 don't work well in general. Even when it's a normal environment, we always strongly discourage that. But now more than ever, because of the pandemic, having 4 children 6 feet apart where one kid can touch something and do an experiment is a recipe for disengagement, okay? Again, you're going to need to have enough materials for each student. Lastly, if the hands-on experimentation is done remotely, always give the materials to a caregiver, to the adult, because adult supervision is required. It's important that parents realize that these things are not toys, and that there needs to be supervision, and that we've made them aware of uh, what is in whatever bag you've sent home. Okay. Now, a couple things. You can take a deep breath because KnowAtom doesn't have any prerequisite knowledge for students. It's by design. Remember, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, but these types of shocks have happened forever. Children show up with disconnects, with a lack of exposure, with low quality instruction from a prior teacher, from a prior school. Okay, that's normal. That happens. And the curriculum is designed to engage that student wherever they are at in a context and create an opportunity for them to develop a high level of skill through a high quality grade level experience, okay, opportunity and task. It's important that you honor that and don't revert back, okay, to poor quality instruction, modifying scopes and sequences and all these sort of things, okay? Stick with your grade level, stick with your scope and sequence, it's gonna be okay, all right? Remember that these next generation science standards are designed to evolve in 3 dimensions over multiple years and multiple units. So they're not once and done. Whatever was missed last year is going to show up again and again, okay? The concept of missed learning is only an unrealized connection. And so the idea of, things being a stepwise process that has to be built on, and if it's not, you've missed a step and you fall into a gap and the world is over, is a farce, okay? All of the connections that were unrealized from last year can be made in the context of this year's units that you're going to teach at grade level, okay? KnowAtom's design and documentation means that you can easily see what should have happened last year, and it will enable you to incorporate missed concepts into this year's grade level units, not by creating new lessons, but by creating opportunities for engagement in discussion, in thinking, okay, and realization. Steps to prepare yourself. Research what units the teacher last year missed, okay? Go into your KnowAtom online interactive system and match, excuse me, match the units from last year to this year's grade level units, okay? So you understand where you can use thinking routines and where you're going to want to create some seed questions where children can learn these concepts in the context of what happens this year just in time. What I mean by that is just in time, we're going to make the connection not in a pre-teaching waste of time, but what we're going to do is we're going to use questions to create realizations in the moment where that realization can be made, okay? It's sort of the equivalent of I can try to pre-teach you all about the importance of putting your feet down when you're coming to a stop on a bicycle, but when you're on the bicycle, you learn that concept very quickly, okay? Because you feel your weight, you're in the context, as you slow, the bike starts to tip to one side to the other. And so that's a moment where we can say, how do we want to deal with that? Put our feet down. That's right. Why do we want to do that? How is that helpful? And that realization is made. And it doesn't take a more esoteric side teaching, okay? So mini lessons and side teaching should be reserved for nuanced, specific skills like what's an average? Okay, if we need to use an average and we need to find the average in order to use it, and we haven't done that in our math curriculum, that's when a mini lesson is appropriate, okay? Get to the concept of what an average is and how to calculate it, and then we're going to use that in the context of that unit. Okay, that's when mini lessons and are relevant. Okay, but I'm talking about concepts that already have a home in a context at grade level, and all we're doing is we're sparking discussion and thereby engaging students in developing an understanding of that misconnection, because we're creating an opportunity for students to build out that web of understanding. Make sure you have enough tools and materials to involve students hands-on. Okay, if your idea of science this year is going to be sending home readers as the equivalent of a worksheet packet because that's going to be science, that is poor instruction. Okay, that's a failed opportunity. Okay, students are capable of more than that. Classrooms are capable of more than that, and we need to do more than that, or else students are going to be left behind. So please, make sure that your kids are set up for success, and you're setting yourself up for success. Develop a standard structure. So if you're using Seesaw, for example, and you can, again, go to seesaw.me. So instead of .com, it's .me, seesaw.me. Create a classroom, create a setup there. Create some templates that just create a standard structure. So when we are reading, in a reading phase, these are the 3 types of things I'm going to ask students to do, okay, in order to engage them in thinking routines. You can evolve those structures over the course of the year, but if you create those standard structures, what's going to happen is that you're going to create a scalable and a consistent flow, which students are going to come to expect and understand, and it's going to save you time, and it's going to be a worthwhile upfront investment that gets everybody on the same page, whether or not you are fully remote or in some form of a hybrid 2 days on, 3 days off, or 3 days on, 3 days off type setting. Use formative assessments. If you have access to NWEA MAP assessments for science, use them. Because what that's going to do is that's going to help validate the learning that's still to be done, right? And so if you are engaging students with those assessments, in those assessments, some frequency, which now that they're home, and if they have access to a computer and to the internet, they can take more frequently than they would in school. And that is going to help you see progress. Okay, you're going to see students almost sort of like pillars. Each unit is a pillar. Okay, and as you go through the lessons of that unit, that pillar is going to fill with understanding. And so as you progress through the year, what you're going to see is the students are filling with understanding of these different pillars until they get to the end of the year where the pillars are complete. Okay, that's the concept here. There's so many positive things to look at about the year ahead. We don't have discipline problems. We don't have classroom management problems. We don't have lunch. We don't have recess. We don't have fighting. We don't have, all of these sort of things are gone. We don't have large class sizes. We now have small class sizes. Kids aren't on top of each other. They're socially distanced. All of those things that took so much time and energy that really don't contribute much to learning, if at all, are gone. So think about how you can prepare yourself for 2020, 2021 with these steps and really make the most, push teaching to its limits, okay? Leave behind the emergency phase. Now, these kids are doing letter formation in the picture, so it's actually a bad example, this particular picture. But, it should be, worksheet packets should be gone, okay? Should be gone for all disciplines. Replace it with segmented learning experiences that have clear prompts, like the screenshot from my Seesaw account, okay? You can take the same PDFs that we're making available to you and drop them in. They become things that kids can write on and highlight and circle and everything. You can record audio instructions. You can record video instructions. Children can respond in text. They can respond with an image. okay? Parents can log in and see all of these things. This is a free tool, okay? It integrates with Google Classroom. Why aren't you using it? Okay? Gone are the, or should be, the multiple unsolicited daily emails to parents that just overwhelm them, that cause anxiety, and make them feel like the school is a chaotic and disorganized place. Okay? If I'm getting 15 emails, if I'm getting 5 emails, and each email is a correction on the prior email because somebody didn't think through and give the effort and time to consider what they were asking, and so it needed to be corrected a bunch of times as soon as anybody read it, that doesn't, it doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good to anybody, to the person who's well-intentioned in sending the email or the person who's well-intentioned in reading it. Okay? Another reason, to engage folks in some kind of platform, and again, this is just a screenshot from seesaw.me, but family members can sign up and connect right with their children's portfolio. Okay? Gets them right on the same page. No emails necessary. The idea that Zoom is, that there's a single daily Zoom where we say hi, answer a question, and disappear, and that's class. Zoom needs to be brought to a higher level. Now, if you're using tools like Zoom or Google Hangouts appropriately, yes, there's an element of hi and seeing each other that's great and important, but it really needs to be repurposed as a place to exchange and think about new ideas and diverse ideas. And you don't have to have a million people on the same screen. You can create little side rooms within Zoom, and so kids can move in and out of those, and so they're participating and they're exchanging ideas. And you could even have students engaged in a Zoom live session like this with different rooms, and they could have a soccer circle going in the background and be working on that as well. So there's a lot of really great opportunities to replace a less robust use of Zoom from the emergency phase with something that is really quality intellectual engagement between students and also not just as peers, but with their adults. And your aides can be part of this too. So if you have a classroom aide, they can be popping into those side rooms as well and acting as a thought partner and observing what's happening. The idea that instruction is going to happen 100% live through streaming video is another thing that needs to go away. You can't inflict lecture on students through live or recorded video, but expect that to be something that is going to be successful, because children are going to tune out. They are literally going to turn off their computers, and they're going to fight their parents, who they know how to win against, to do something else. And it's going to create a real problem. Okay, it's going to create tension between the learning system and the home system and the learner themselves. So just avoid it. Use tools like Seesaw, like Google Classroom. Use those tools to create asynchronous learning environments where kids are getting video, they're getting text, they're getting all of these elements. But the key is that it's specific, it's directed, it's clear, it has a purpose, it's manageable, and the child understands where to start and where to stop and what's expected of them. Okay, so again, if even the little guys, they can do stuff with their caretaker can take the video and submit it. Okay, and then when it comes to viewing things, the child and the caretaker can view things together. Okay, here's a picture thinking routine. This is a graphic directly off KnowAtom's site. 2 seconds. I downloaded it and I dropped it into my Seesaw account. Okay, now I can scribble on it. I can highlight it. I can add a photo. I can add an audio recording. I can add a video. Okay, I can go through all of this, and then I can click to the next thing where I go through the professional reading of the text. Okay, lots of great opportunities to elevate these processes. Okay, so just sort of wrapping up here. Key things. Has your school ordered what you need? Time's running out. School is starting. We are days, if weeks to days away from school starting. If you're going to need to send things home, you're going to need those things to send home. So you need enough hands-on materials in your class. If you go to log in to look at these resources and your username and password's not working, chances are your account has been suspended because we don't have a purchase order from your school or district yet. Okay? You need to go to your principals, you need to go to whomever is the point person in your district and get access to these things so that your school, that your classroom and your learners have what's necessary to be successful and hit the ground running, and you're not waiting. Keep in mind that because of COVID-19, a lot of disruptions in the supply chain have happened. So this is not a normal year where we could just turn around and send you something in 2 days. KnowAtom has social distancing in its warehouse. We're running multiple shifts, and so on and so forth. But we also have, we are subject to slower deliveries. There are less truckers in depots, and things are moving more slowly. So now is the time to get your materials straight. Okay, log in. Make sure your login's working. Make sure that your district contract is active and you're covered. Otherwise, you're not going to have access to any of those resources. Remember that when you log in, down the bottom of the screen, there are those resources, but also within the units, all of the Spanish readers, visual vocab for those early grades, the recordings, the professional recordings of all these videos, all of that's going to be there for you. So make use of that resource, okay? Don't forget about Soccer Circle, especially if you're in grades 3 on up, 3 to 8. Soccer Circle is a tool that is, again, when you look at the bottom of the screen, supporting resources that can be vital in this. You create a private group text, basically, and they can chat and ask questions and answer questions and have a Socratic dialogue remotely, and you can password protect that. You can leave it open for an hour, for a day, for a week, for a month. Okay. There's a how to use it guide down here, this blue button, and then also there's sentence starters, how to engage in Socratic dialogue, what a Socratic discussion is, and how to evaluate it. All that's down here. And some of these resources may be useful to share with parents, but again, don't just dump it on a parent. You need to, if you're going to provide a resource, you need to explain the context of the resource as it would normally be used, how you intend to use it, and then what you hope that the parent or the caregiver will take away from that resource and how you expect them to play a role. Okay? Very, very important. Otherwise, you're just going to be creating frustration. So my last slide, and again, thank you for all your time. Key things to act on almost in order here. Make sure you're getting enough materials for every child at a minimum through March 1st. Why March 1st? Because that's sort of the almost like 1 year after the start of this pandemic. So hopefully we're in a different world by March 1st for a better and a less socially distanced world. But nonetheless, at least through March 1st, if not the whole year. Now, remember, if you have leftover units from last year, you don't need to get those units again. You can just get the extra materials, the second set of consumables or whatever you need, okay? And people would mostly be affected at units 7 and 8 and 9, maybe unit 6 if somebody was really behind. But, just in that example, people are behind, that's a gap. That's no different than shutting school down, right? Teachers should not rewind to last year. Instead, approach the new year ahead at grade level. Use your at grade level scope and sequence. Don't revert to the emergency phase where science was dropped or where watching videos of other people's lessons or videos of whatever things off of YouTube, doing worksheets and packets or in surface check-ins were acceptable. All that should be off the table. okay? We know what's coming, and what's coming is remote and or hybrid learning. So let's get it right, okay? Let's prevent the gap instead of having to fix it, okay, by reverting and remaining in an emergency phase. Robust, full instruction is going to happen if you position yourself with the materials and the mindset to succeed, okay? Remember that looking to alternative standards, creating focused standards, picking and choosing, these things are going to traumatize students, and you have a choice to not traumatize students. Offer them high quality at grade level instruction. Let the context of the units be the home for any student learning or skill development that wasn't approached last year, but don't diminish student learning and skill development by preventing them from engaging at grade level, okay? By trying to reinvent the wheel, by scrambling a coherent sequence, and by abandoning the science of what we know and how we know children learn best, okay? Also, please take advantage of KnowAtom's new on-demand professional development sessions, which we've had a number of them already this summer. So if you are on our email list, you probably already got these. We're going to be going in depth into the tips and techniques for how to engage each of those 5 sections remotely of a lesson at the different grade levels. We've already got a number of webinars out there. One is Propelling Learning by Creating an Environment that Fosters Curious and Confident Thinkers. Another one is Facilitating Productive Discussions, the Key to Developing a Robust Plan for Unfinished Learning. A third that just came out last week, How to Maintain a Rigorous and Student-Centered Remote Learning Environment. Okay, we're also responding actively because we're expecting a wave of retirements. People, as they may be sick and other things, there's going to be a lot of substitutes involved, and new hires and other things. KnowAtom is going to be implementing a professional development self-guided course, 3 actually self-guided courses within the KnowAtom Interactive. And these are being filmed by former KnowAtom teachers who have retired and have lived this as recently as June. And so they are going to be speaking specifically to pandemic and remote learning with KnowAtom, and that on-demand course is going to be free within the interactive. There's going to be sort of 3 parts. One part will be getting started with a next generation inquiry environment. The next will be using KnowAtom remotely, sort of a quick start guide. And the third will be more in-depth, looking at each of those 5 segments, tips, tools, and tricks for accomplishing those remotely. So thank you so much for all your time. I appreciate it. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone else here at KnowAtom. My email address is fvigeant@knowatom.com. And again, I thank you for your time. I wish you and your team the best of luck. And I want to just let you know that we appreciate the intense dedication and commitment of the folks that we work with to providing their students the highest quality learning experience that they can, regardless of the mode or medium. And we're here to support you, and we will be doing that throughout the year with additional resources. So please, if you haven't already, please take the time to subscribe to our blog. It's free. Make sure your email address is on our mailing list, again, for free, so that you'll be in the know as soon as resources are available. Thanks again, and have a great day. Good luck.